Like a lot of artistic corners of Asheville, the city's improv theater scene is far more robust than you'd expect in a town of this size. There are a few schools of improv in the region, some relatively new producers, and some seasoned veterans who have been working to grow the scene for many years. All of it comes together for the first week of May at the new Asheville Improv Festival.
Like Tom, I've done shows in Chicago and LA for people who were there because they were required to be there for the class they were paying for. But you could instead pack out a thrift store.
Yeah, revolve in West Asheville.
You could just pack it out, get some pizza, have an awesome night of really good art, and everyone enjoyed themselves. I'd pick that any day of the week.
I'm Matt Peiken, a longtime Asheville journalist, but also a longtime improviser here. I used the occasion of the upcoming festival to gather 4 important players in the local scene. Gillian Bellinger, founder of Misfit Improv, Laurie Jones, co-founder of Adesto Theater, Timothy Hearn of Speakeasy Improv, and Tom Chalmers, the founder of Asheville's longest-running improv troupe, The Reasonably Priced Babies. We talk about the history and growth of local improv, the challenges of sustaining an improv community here, and the collaborative nature of the people and groups leading the way. Our conversation took place before Hurricane Helene, which forced the postponement of the festival, which was originally scheduled last fall. But the thrust of our conversation is still timely. I began by asking Tom Chalmers what the scene was like when he first arrived in 2006 and the landscape for what he wanted to do with improv in Asheville.
The Feral Chihuahuas was a group in town that did some sketch, some improv, and I think they would even say they did better when they eventually just moved towards sketch, and they did great stuff with short videos and otherwise. But when we started performing, I feel like we were like, hey, we're doing an improv show, and people were like, yeah, I've seen improv. And we had to go, no, I don't think you've seen us do improv. So a lot of times people would come and be like, oh, well, yeah, no, that was a good time. How I started teaching improv was there was an acting conservatory that started called NYS3, the New York Studio of Stage and Screen in Asheville, which was just that. It was like a program where you could take Meisner and Shakespeare and voiceover. And Richard Handy, who's the organizer, found me one day working the counter at Pack Place. So like, I hear you used to be sort of a big deal in improv. And I was like, And he was like, I need someone to be the improv wing of this acting conservatory. Would you be that? And I was like, let's see, kind of thing. So when it first started going, I did some free sample classes and things like that. And then little by little, it grew. And it was really nice to have people like that. You were one of the 5 things that they were taking during the week. And there were some people from Asheville, but definitely people coming up from Greenville, Spartanburg, and over from Knoxville and otherwise to take this like acting conservatory program. So that's how I fell back into teaching improv here in Asheville. That studio eventually broke up 2 years later because it's a hard model to sustain, but it had a really nice run.
What was the audience at the time for it? Were tourists coming and locals not, or was it more locally driven and under the radar as far as tourists were concerned?
Mostly local. So again, we started performing at the original Magnetic Theater. And again, we started doing shows on Tuesday nights in the winter.
That's a prime
in River
night
Arts
for
District.
performance.
Yes. And again, we did shows to 7 people and things like that. We used to call them the second row ladies kind of thing. These people who like came to all of our shows and they still come 13 years later kind of thing.
So those were the first Babies shows.
Yes.
So what do you think has kept the Babies going all this time? Because, early on you didn't have a lot of audience. You're playing on Tuesday nights.
Right.
What kept it going?
Again, it was rare that someone would come to a show and have to turn to their friend and be like, sorry about that. I had heard they were good.
So the quality itself was consistently good and you built
think
from
so.
there.
Yeah, which is where I think maybe not previously. Sometimes, again, people had, I've always wanted to see improv. I'm curious. They would go and some people, fun enough, and some people like, I'm confused. I'm not quite sure what I'm watching. I don't get why some people are laughing so hard and some people are leaving halfway through. So I think that was part of it, was consistency and the fact that many of us, myself, having performed for years previously with the Groundlings in New York and training in Chicago, plus Mundy and Karen being in the Milwaukee improv scene and Mundy with the Dead Wives and other groups like that, we were coming in with some performing pedigree.
When Asheville Improv Collective came around, was that the first concerted school and performance group since the Babies?
So Asheville School of Improv, which I was then running through 35 Below at Asheville Community Theater was a couple years in existence when Asheville Improv Collective came. So that was then an additional school. And then it was, again, exciting to then see troupes and then jams and things pop up from that. So that was a cool thing to see, and also just variety. We do mostly short form, and they were doing more like montages and longer form. So I thought that's when the improv scene expanded.
Yeah, that was like around 2016, 2017. Yeah. Tim, you were part of that around that time. Had you done much improv before you came here and came up through Asheville Improv Collective?
Yeah, I did it all throughout college. Noun improv troupe at Appalachian State. My God, shout out to Noun. And that's actually funny. I was thinking about that the other day. In college, we performed for 200 people without even thinking about it. Yeah. Easy. We had big stages, and they were all college kids. They'd come out every night.
Now, when AIC, it seemed like it reached its apex in 2019 through the Improv Festival. It was a pretty great festival for the first time. And then the pandemic really killed everything with AIC. You developed, Tim, Speakeasy Improv shortly after, when things were starting to clear from the rubble of the pandemic. Tell me about what you were wanting to do with Speakeasy. What gap were you trying to fill, or where did you see as your opportunity in the wake of Asheville Improv Collective?
So I was teaching middle school theater. Theater's my thing. So I was already during COVID developing a lesson plan and a curriculum. So I had it. I had all the things already I wanted to do. And then Katie Jones and I, we worked together a lot. Katie's incredible. She's fun. She's cool. Katie really liked what I was doing with Speakeasy, so then I did stuff through Magnetic. But we were constantly bopping around to different places to do classes and stuff like that. We were wearing masks with like clear
visors?
Yeah, visors.
Yeah.
So then you'd be like distance and the mask and everything. When I worked with AIC, I taught people in a closet. I love the juxtaposition between teaching after COVID compared to with AIC, because we were like 6 people in this random Habitat Brewing closet.
Yeah, it was the Habitat storage room that you were teaching classes in. Tell me, when you developed Speakeasy and were trying to bring classes, to my mind, there was nothing happening other than the babies trying to rekindle their shows, but there wasn't any consistent school or performance happening. What did you want to accomplish with Speakeasy?
Primarily, I wanted to test out my lesson plan. I think like when you're a teacher and an artist, you realize that your lesson plan is a creative project. Once you start making it, you can't not do it.
So it was more school-based than thinking we're going to do performances.
Yeah, because also nobody wanted to go to shows. Nobody wanted to do a lot of things back then.
That sounds like a great time to start an improv company.
Yeah, because everybody needed to get out of their house. Everybody needed to shake it off, and everybody came. Everybody was ready.
And you found some audiences. I don't know about your classes, about what your enrollment was like, but I know when you were throwing performances, you were getting crowds pretty quickly. More after this. In Asheville and throughout western North Carolina, Hurricane Helene swept away hundreds of lives, thousands of livelihoods, and countless elements that make living here so unique and special. If you're in a position to help this region recover, I'm going to direct you to 2 reputable organizations to send money. One is the North Carolina Disaster Relief Fund. You'll find details at nc.gov/donate. The other is Mountain True. It will take years and many millions of dollars to restore our legendary mountains, trails, and rivers, and that work is the heart of Mountain True's mission. Learn more and donate at mountaintrue.org.
We also started to do a variety show. Like I didn't want just improv. So we were doing like, I'd have a musician, I'd have a comedian, we had a magician. I picked a random street artist that performed out of my restaurant one day, Alex Travers. He's great. He's actually blowing up now. It's awesome. So like little things like that, like we would just mix up our shows with. We'd still have at least 2 improv troupes.
Right. And it seems like now, with Gillian and Laurie coming into the picture roughly around the same time. I don't know if one of you predates the other, but I think maybe Misfit was first. But it seems like with both of you coming in, this scene is more vibrant now than it's ever been, in combination with what Tom is doing in the foundation that Tim laid with Speakeasy. Gillian, with Misfit, Were you doing a version of this in another city before launching here? Tell me about what grounding you'd set up for yourself before even coming here.
Yeah, so I've been an improviser and a teacher for a long time, and I've worked at a lot of schools. So I had strong opinions about what classes should look like, how it can be in service of students, how performance is in service of students, why improv matters in a community. I hadn't run a school before. One thing that is really important to me is, so historically, improv has been a sport that is of the privileged. And so inclusion was a really important part of that story. And I think it's still developing what that means. But certainly for my own lived experience as a female improviser, I've certainly had interesting experiences in being marginalized, to put it mildly. And I realized that even in that, I, as a person who is white and middle class, and that I sit in a lot of privilege, even as a woman, and that making space for voices in improv was really important. So it wasn't just about improv performance or classes. It was about what does it mean to be an improv community, and how is inclusion part of that story, and how do we guide the experience of the people who are new to improv or finding improv or redefining what improv means to them, and how do we potentially challenge people who have been improvisers for a long time to say, oh, wait, there's a different way that I could show up on stage that is about connection as opposed to being about humor that is to either the exclusion of someone else or humor that makes someone else the butt of the joke.
That's interesting you frame it in that way. On one hand, I would think Asheville might be a challenging place to do something like that because there aren't a lot of schools of improv, and it's not already a very fertile community. On the other hand, that might be a benefit because you're starting instead from ground zero, and you can, not ground zero, but at least in terms of what you wanted to do with Misfit, you had a real fresh slate in front of you. What about this city allowed you to do, or is allowing you to do what you'd set out to do?
There would have been a challenge no matter where I went.
Challenge how?
Like American society.
Oh, that challenge.
So I think that's part of the story of inclusion, is facing up to the fact that we as a society, whether that's as American or just humans, haven't always done a great job of building connection. So what does that look like when we think about art and when we think about space? So an example of a way Misfit does not do it well is that we have a flight of stairs into our space, which I hate. But I have not found an ADA accessible space that we can afford. So there is a tension between making space and creating a space where everyone can be involved while at the same time making a business run too. It's just in general is not an easy task to run an improv school or an improv performance company. Not easy. It's also not easy to run a small business. One thing I will say about Asheville is that generally, Asheville, I think, views itself, and most of the folks who are improvisers lean towards a more progressive perspective about the world, right? There's an inherent ideology to yes and that wants to build connection with each other. The result of that is that I think people are more interested in community. And because of that, they're also willing to make space for each other. For example, when we go around and we do names at the beginning, we also do pronouns. It's not a thing. Everyone just knows that's going to happen. We also are really clear around the guidelines of what the story is, and we haven't gotten pushback. And I think part of that is Asheville. I think part of that is the evolution of improv in the sense that improv has grown. If I think about what improv was like 20 years ago when I was a baby improviser, I thought I was crazy. And in retrospect, no. I was just trying to operate in a system that was very, very racist, sexist.
Whereas you came into a place here in Asheville without already a codified, solidified misogyny or racism baked into an improv community or theater,
Yeah, I think that helped. I think also, like, having come out of a pandemic, having come out of George Floyd, like, I think there have been a lot of reckonings in improv theaters that offered a lot of clarity about how do we systemically support people. Part of what's interesting about running a school is I love improv. I also love the articulation of systems. So how does a system serve people? And that's an interesting question and idea to me. So that's a little bit more of the businessy hat that I put on when I think about how improv shows up in a community. An example is we have people in our community that have struggled with mental illness. And that is a challenging element to engage with, because how do we allow space for people to show up in a different way than other people might? It's just a challenging question. It's a complex question. How do we take care of everyone?
Yeah, and that answer floats left to right, front and center with everything that you do. Laurie, you and Paul, your husband, moved here from LA, right? Were you already doing a form of evening-length improvised plays in LA, like in the way that you're doing with Adesto? Or is Adesto your first effort to codify a company that is devoted to evening-length improvised theater?
Yeah, both. So we were doing long-form narrative improv, really telling improvised plays, full-length improvised plays in LA. But this is our first time doing it solo as a company. So we were both a part of organizations. So I am a part of Ripley Improv, and we do long-form dystopia and sci-fi. And then Paul is a part of Bearded Company, and they do a lot of different genres as well. And we both found a home at Impro Theater in LA, where they did lots of different types of genres. And so we had no idea we were going to stay in Asheville. So we moved here in 2020. I was like, let's just go hiking in Asheville for a few months, because this pandemic is surely going to blow over by then. And so we put all our stuff in storage because we thought we were going to be back. And then we fell in love with the city. We fell in love with the city and the art scene and the humans and all the people doing improv. It was great. And we have had a child and all these things. So we're like, this is our home now. And so then we're like, let's just create the things we love the most. What are the things we love the most about long-form narrative improv, and how do we put it into practice? And then how do we take some of these genres that some of them we've done, or some of them we've always wanted to do, and then do it our own way, on our own terms. And mainly it's felt so lovely because we brought this to the improv scene here, and people were down, and extraordinarily talented people were ready to do it with us. And it's been really cool. I had this sort of aha moment after our improvised horror show that Tim was in. It was opening night, and the show was magical. It was absolutely magical. And I was like, this is it. I think my dream is coming true. And all these people are doing the thing, I think, better than I had been able to do it in LA. And they just started doing it.
Yeah, you are not running a school, although there's an instructional element to that. You're doing workshops, things like that.
Yeah.
But you're primarily a theater company producing work. Did you have in your mind an ideal of a performer? Like, I want them to come from the improv world, or they need to come from the theater world, and we'll teach them improv. Tell me about who your range of performers are.
Yeah, it's a real combination, because we are putting on a play. It's absolutely a play. And so having people that have just done theater, and there's a lot of theater exercises that are improv based. So even those theater folks have done a lot of improv, whether they think they have or not. And then improv folks that have never done traditional theater bring a different kind of energy to the space as well. So for the spontaneous play, we just have a combination. We have basically half and half. Half the people just really did theater. Half the people just really did improv. And then we married the two. And it's cool because the way people come up with story is different. Sometimes improvisers are a bit quicker. They're quick on their feet because we've done a lot of short form, or we only had 20 minutes and you better get it in. And then you have the theater folks who are ready to walk down stage and find their light and do their full monologue. And so having both of those skill sets and learning from each other is so cool and so rad.
Before we get to the second half of our conversation, I want to remind everybody that the Asheville Improv Festival happens May 7th through 10th at 4 different venues throughout the city. We have celebrity improvisers coming in to perform and teach. Some top troupes from around the country are blessing us with their genius, sharing the stage with your favorite local groups. You'll see many stripes of improv over these 4 nights, and for all the details and tickets, go to AshevilleImprovFestival.com. Tom, you've been in this scene now, or at least in this region, since 2006. We have Adesto, we have Misfit, Speakeasy, not to mention there's a school of improv in Black Mountain. There are some other entities. Can you describe how you see the scene today compared to all your previous years here? Give us a sense of the health of the community or what's lacking. Where are we at?
I'll focus on the variety of shows first, which is vibrant. Again, the idea that you can see Babies put on a strong short form show. There's something about a baby show that is a show. And then there's Scuttlebutt now, which are doing Armando's out of Zoom, pulling together people, again, from improv, from theater, from stand-up. So that's really great. You have the Adesto, what's going on. You have What's in the Box. You have all these like...
What's in the Box is a Speakeasy production.
Yes.
Right.
So you have all these different things. And then the music improv things that are coming out of Misfit. So the variety of things that are going on with, again, a pretty consistent quality. That's what I see is really nice.
Yeah. So we have the Asheville Improv Fest coming up, which in some ways is a big celebration of where we are. It's a pulse-taking moment for this city. But we don't have a performance space that's devoted to improv. Some cities don't. Any of you can weigh in on this. How important is it or not that there isn't like a central locality where audiences know they can get improv? Is that important?
It would be nice, but as someone who, and in those early years, I can remember with my friend Jenny Bunn, we were like, we're going to open up a comedy space together. Again, I remember it's the only place that hasn't been turned into anything down on that River Arts District row. There's like this tall brick chimney. And we're like, we're going to get that space. We're going to call it the joke stack. But it turns out it's riddled with asbestos.
I like the idea of we just see this place, and just because we have a great, cute name for it, we're going to turn this into a theater. Not based on anything about the building.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Why that business plan did not advance beyond that. But also, it's really difficult. So I will just defer to these are the folks who do the Asheville Comedy Festival, the stand-up comedy festival that always happens in early August. They used to be known as Laugh Your Asheville Off. They had the S&W space, and they were going to turn that into a stand-up comedy venue. So again, Asheville is great in many ways, but Asheville is also very expensive, and there's reasons that your favorite restaurant has fallen away. So I would just say, yeah, it would be great. And to Gillian's credit, found a space in Fairview, at least, hey, come find us. This is where we teach our classes. But you can see that is even difficult. So it would be great. But the fact that it hasn't happened, I don't feel has held us back as a community. It's just very expensive to maximize where you're probably doing at best 4, maybe 5 shows a week. If you are maxing out, that space is sitting empty otherwise. And then are you running a restaurant? Are you running a bar? Yeah, I would love to do what the Annoyance has in Chicago or otherwise like that. But that is really difficult to carry.
Yeah, there's almost like separate businesses in a way, restaurant and bar. And I remember coaching Tim about this when Tim was wanting to turn Speakeasy, and maybe you still want to have as a more full-fledged like cocktail bar in addition to having improv there. Running a cocktail bar itself, a successful one, is difficult. Running an improv theater is difficult. Owning a building is...
Anywhere. Yeah. Plus the costs of, if you're doing that in downtown Asheville, yikes. But even perimeter Asheville is yikes now. So they tried that model. They're getting national stand-up comedians coming through, and they ran it for about 6 months, and they're like, this isn't going to work. This is just not feasible. I think if it's going to happen, it's probably going to be in a perimeter satellite space that no one really knew that was an area or a possibility. But the idea of, hey, how come no one's done with that downtown space is because it's really expensive.
Yeah. And maybe it's also co-op-y. Like maybe all 4 of our schools like rotate through a space, because it's interesting, as Tom was offering, is that real estate here is much more expensive than the population would indicate. Because we are a tourist destination and because we are beautiful, Asheville is very beautiful, it means that it is exorbitant to rent a space. And not only is it about what is the rent, it's also what are the terms of the lease. And so commercial landlords can do something called a triple net lease, which means you have to do everything. So like all of your utilities, if your HVAC goes out, you have to replace the system. And so like you're in charge of it as if you owned it.
But you get no benefits. You get no ownership benefits out of it.
But you're still leasing a space, which... What happens is this is art intersecting with city politics of how do we actually take care of art in a city and make space for it? And Magnetic is a really good example. So Magnetic had been around Asheville for a really long time, did amazing new work by Katie Jones. I hear she's really nice.
Yeah, she's pretty cool, I think.
And they lost their space for a variety of reasons. And Laurie, maybe you could speak to this more. But part of it was that their building got bought and the rent went up immensely.
They were struggling, teetering financially, like that, holding on, trying inventive things for years.
Sure.
This wasn't anything happening
and
overnight.
There are ways a city can make that easier for an artistic community, or they can ignore it, or they can make it harder.
One of the things about the arts, and there are these buckets of accepted, understood art forms, the fine arts, visual art, fine arts. You look at the Asheville Art Museum and Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center and the Center for Craft, just the big three institutional things. You have music, the Asheville Symphony. There are theater companies like NC Stage, Asheville Community Theater that are kind of anchor institutions. Improv is one of those forms that seems to fall through the cracks of understanding and embrace as a serious art form. And when I say serious, meaning, oh, yes, there's real skill set and value, community, cultural value to this. And I'm wondering, where can city leaders, governmental leaders, city council, county commissioners, what would the improv community be wanting from city leaders that maybe they're not getting right now? We have Katie Cornell at Arts AVL. She works her ass off, but she's a one-woman lobbying crew. You know, when you get a chance to get into the ear, or if you had the chance to get into the ear of city leaders, what kind of things do you want them to know?
I'll make a specific reference where Wicked Weed is right now. So I know the folks who owned that space and were looking to sell it. And it could have been like yet another taco franchise kind of thing like that. They got a lot of bids. And then they were like, all right, Wicked Weed. But just making that choice of like, when space comes available, can you sort of slightly insist on, rather than it just being to the highest bidder, can we make allowances for what if this ended up being an arts group or an arts space kind of thing, or at least some portion of it, rather than, yay, another brewery or otherwise. But that's what I would say is as things become available and things shift, is there some consideration for keeping the things that really do pull people towards Asheville on the menu, as opposed to, great, we lost yet another theater space, so that the flavor of Asheville remains varied.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in subsidized space and subsidized art is so important for a city, because especially if it is about who has the most money, and if it becomes business over art, then I think you sacrifice a lot. And so there's a lot of great art in Asheville. And think about all the art on buildings, all the visual art on buildings. It's because it's a priority. So I think if we want performing arts to be a priority, then subsidized space in some form or fashion would be a wonderful way to indicate that to the artists and also to the community, because we're all here because we think art helps our community and because it improves our lives and makes people happier and lets people question things. And so indicating to us and to the city that it's important would be awesome.
Yeah.
So Laurie and I both came from LA. And one of the theater companies in LA is called The Road. And they had a space in North Hollywood that they rented for $1. And the city gave that to them. It used to be an old LADWP building. And they weren't using it. And they rented that building to them for $1. And like, that gave them such luxury. There were 2 theaters, and then they also then rented the bottom part to the Scenic Painters Union. And so they would do these art shows of the art of all these scenic painters that did movie sets. So it was really interesting collaboration. There was also a bunch of classes that would run out of there that weren't road oriented, that the Road would also rent at a really cheap rate to those folks, at $30 an hour or something. And it is within the power of municipalities to think about, okay, we have this space that isn't being utilized. How do we utilize it in an effective way? Because the money is not the only currency that operates in a community. There has to be buy-in around that. And I will say that Asheville is a progressive city generally. It's also in a state that isn't necessarily progressive from a governmental standpoint. So it's not just about Asheville City, it's about how does North Carolina treat the arts? And it doesn't really.
Yeah, I did an episode where I did a story for Blue Ridge Public Radio at one point where I was asking people in the city, how much do you think of your tax dollars every year go to subsidize the arts? And people were saying maybe $20, like $25, $7, maybe $10. You know how much it was? 57 cents
Wow.
a year. 57 cents a year from your tax dollars, the state tax that you pay, were going to the arts.
Going back to earlier, when I stopped looking for a bar and found Story Parlor, like Asheville's sort of a team-up town. I love giving energy to Story Parlor because that was a nice place to accomplish the things that were more important, like finding a way for improv to be more artistic, to be more included in your life.
And you hold, to be clear, you hold your classes now at Story Parlor, right?
Yeah, we also run an all arts open mic, which blows out every month. It's incredible. And then I teach a little bit with Erin in some of her classes, which is for like business leaders and stuff like that. So I think really that's one of the answers. We're also pretty privileged to be improvisers talking about what the government should do for us.
I'm not saying what the government should do, but the election's coming up and I'm interviewing city council candidates and everyone is talking about, I stand behind funding core services, core city services. That's malleable. What are core city services? Roads, obviously, water.
That was my point. Parking. Because, like, I hate all the new parking lots going up, I will say, like downtown. But, like, Story Parlor's biggest issue has always been parking. And there are a lot of places where it's like we have a lot right next to us that does not get used by anybody. I'm sure somebody owns it. But every day it's empty, and we would get in trouble if people were in it. So there are a lot of issues that just go by the wayside. And that's where I think the team up comes into play of like we team up with the store across the street and we always say, hey, when you guys are closed, can we use your parking? That is the community that we've built. We shouldn't have to do that. But that would be my thing, especially with the connection with Story Parlor. Like parking's rough.
Just a little bit of Asheville history. So when I first got to a town, and again, I was like, I guess I should probably get myself a job. All right, I've worked box office before. So I worked for the Diana Wortham Theater, but also Pack Place. I worked at the Pack Place. So where the Art Museum is now, and then the Wortham Center below, that used to be Pack Place Arts and Education Center, which was an art museum, kind of kids' health museum, like a earth science museum, and the theater. And there was a whole design behind that when they were going to like open like a mall downtown. Like, no, what do we want the center of our downtown to be? So they opened up Pack Place where you can come and buy like a multi-ticket that was reasonably priced kind of to get to go to these things. And but also with rehearsal space and event space that was intentionally made available cheaply. So that was the energy behind Pack Place. And then there were other reasons, but when they made the choice to like, no, let's just let the Asheville Art Museum take over most of that space and delete the Pack Place model, that was an unfortunate imprint on the downtown plan because obviously it's a gorgeous exterior and all that kind of stuff, the art museum. But that idea of, hey, let's have there was like the gallery when you came in, there was this kind of front gallery that was intentionally made available to local artists for 2-week exhibits of let's show your photography, all that kind of stuff. So that was something that was built in that was like, yeah, I don't know about that anymore. I think that I find too much of that has happened in my time here where big money has pushed away well-intended arts considered spaces.
Can the Asheville improv scene keep growing in the way that it is? It seems that it's happened very organically in a way that nobody could have planned.
So I think a couple questions. One, who are we trying to serve? So are we trying to serve locals or are we trying to serve tourists or both? And I think that's fine. It just delineates the choices that we make and why we make them. I think also, Matt, in the phrasing of the question, I feel like there's a priority made about performance. And for some people, improv is not about performance. Making friends, it's about learning how to public speak more effectively, like I just didn't. It is about developing confidence. We had a student say, I'm a mom, I have an 18-month-old. This is the one day of the week that I get to get out of my house. So improv does many things for many people. It is not just about performance. So the question to me is not just, can we grow without a specific performance space? Can the community grow in a variety of different ways? So what I will offer about our space There are some limitations to our space that are difficult. One of them being we're in a mixed use space. So we're restricted by times we can make noise, which is frustrating, especially when you're trying to make a business solvent. To be restricted by time is challenging because you're trying to serve the needs of your students, but we may not be able to offer a class before 7:30 because the massage therapist underneath us needs the space to be quiet. So there's a little bit of balance that we're trying to collaborate with those people that are in that space, also with our landlord, also with what our students need. And at the same time, we are growing immensely. So we offered 7 classes this term and 5 of them sold out. That is more than twice the number of students that we had this time last year. So growth is happening. Part of the question about space, and I think this is true for every improv space everywhere, is at some point you're going to hit the capacity of whatever building you're in. Whether that is Story Parlor and you're utilizing it as a rental, whether that's NC Stage and you're utilizing it as a rental, even in those situations, we're navigating those rentals against their calendar. I don't know that there's a world where you don't come up against something that creates an obstacle to just total freedom. Right. And you're also trying to serve a lot of directives, right? Am I trying to serve the mom? Am I trying to serve someone who is on their way to Chicago and then to LA? Am I trying to serve someone who lives here and always will? Am I trying to serve a tourist? So yeah, so I think growth is inevitable. There's 4 people in this room. 2 of us wouldn't have been here 2 years ago. And improvisers are scrappy. We will figure out how to make it work. Will it look as ideal as we would like? Maybe not. And to Tim's point about partnership, and also Tom's about Pack Place, we will figure out those partnerships with each other and with people in Asheville to find a way to continue to serve the people that we want to serve.
I think that just piggybacking on Gillian's point is that part of what makes this scene sustainable with all of these different companies and schools is our collaboration with each other. I've had the opportunity to perform with everyone in this room, which is really cool. And I think to some extent having like specialties and interests and things that the different companies flourish in is helpful. It's a good thing because then we can say, I have someone that wants to join classes for the first time. I'm like, great. I know there are 2 people in this room that I can send them to right now. And then in terms of the types of shows we do, we know how to direct people. That's a good thing. But then on top of it's like that collaboration. So a little bit of a divide and conquer strategy, but a little bit of like, how are we in this together to support and keep up the art that we love? And so that I think is important for people to know because it's not a competition. We all love this art and the different ways that it can become even bigger.
Yeah, one of the things that's really heartening about how this scene is, everybody here is doing their own distinct things, and it's all in collaboration in a way. Everybody here cross-pollinates. All the performers here, Gillian, you're talking about students. It's not just about performance. It's all very true. And I think that can keep going just because that's the way Asheville is as much as anything.
Matt, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you feel about the growth of the Asheville improv scene and that there is a company now dedicated to doing improvised plays, as we were in this space together one time a few years ago when you brought some people together with the idea of, I want to do improvised plays.
Yeah. Believe me, like I would have a lobbyist go to Paul and Laurie's door and say, cast me in every show. Yeah. So no, I'm thrilled for that. But it's part and parcel of why this scene is where it is now. I can't think of another city, and I've been in Cincinnati, which has a pretty good improv scene, and Minneapolis, which is a very good improv scene. I don't think Asheville takes a back seat right now to any of them, at least in terms of the variety that's happening, of the schooling that's going on, the performances going on. And like you're saying, it's a scrappy city, and that's how we are. And I think we're riding that train really well.
One quick visual of that. So the Asheville Club, is that the one downtown here? Is that what that was called? It used to be Kim's Wigs across from Ben & Jerry's.
the Asheville Club. I remember performing there for a very weird show.
Those were Monday nights, weren't those Monday shows?
Very small.
But anyway,
that was a good one.
So again, that used to be Kim's Wigs, which was just literally this corner shop with just like the styrofoam heads, and which was just the oddest store. And then it got bought out. It became like another bar, and I was like, And
that's when it became a performance space on
but
Mondays.
but again, which is literally there's just a space to the left of the door as you walk in.
Yes, it was an awful place to perform.
It was terrible.
But to my point, which is, I remember thinking like, this is so sad that this is like one of the few like options for improv. But also I was like, but I love that about Asheville Improv, that we can even make a left to the door space in this downtown venue work.
And we need that humility. I think it does really help us, because thinking about it not being as a serious quote unquote art as some of the others, I do think that's shifting a lot. And I think it's shifting because a lot of people in the room. But there's also something lovely about the humility of, we have no idea how the show's going to go. It is completely made up on the spot. It could be amazing and it could not resonate with someone, and that's okay, and that's part of it. And I think we have people in the community, and the reason we've stuck around so long is because we've had those fails and those successes, and that's part of the journey of it. But I loved coming to Asheville and seeing a show in a thrift store. So like Tom, I've done shows in Chicago and LA for people who were there because they were required to be there for the class they were paying for. And that is why they came to my show. And it was in a beautiful theater in a beautiful space. But you could instead pack out a thrift store.
Yeah, Revolve in West Asheville.
You could just pack it out, get some pizza, have an awesome night of really good art, and everyone enjoyed themselves. I'd pick that any day of the week.
And also, I think it goes to the art of improv itself asks you to be better about all that stuff. You know, I teach my students, like, you're not just yes-anding the person, you're yes-anding the setting that you're performing in. You're yes-anding the player, like the person beneath the improviser. So you're yes-anding the person on stage, but you're also yes-anding them at home. And you're yes-anding all the things. It demands that you come to it with a higher level of thinking if you're going to live by the rules that we teach. And I think most of us are getting to the point, or probably have been at the point, where we teach this for how we live our life. So it's important to hold yourself to a higher standard while also playing with the fundamentals of what we teach every day.
That's it for this pre-festival podcast conversation. A couple of self-indulgent plugs here. You'll find me performing with Gillian Bellinger in the duo called Mudflat Mondays, and again with another local troupe I'm in called Middle Rage. You'll also find me playing the drums to support a fantastically inventive solo improv performance from the wonderful Jill Bernard. Look for all of those on the schedule you will find at AshevilleImprovFestival.com. Thanks to Gillian Bellinger, Laurie Jones, Timothy Hearn, and Tom Chalmers for gabbing with me about all things improv. I'm Matt Peiken, and I hope to see you out and about at the Asheville Improv Festival. Hey everyone, Matt Peiken here with the Overlook Podcast. Did you know this is my full-time job? That's right, I left Asheville's public radio station to start this show from scratch. Now, I'm coming to you to help keep it going. This is my first fundraising campaign, and my goal? Reaching just $1,000 in monthly contributions. That's right, just $1,000 in monthly contributors by Election Day. That means you, listening right now, can make a big difference with your support. Membership starts at just $5 a month. Think about the difference the Overlook makes in your knowledge and engagement with the heartbeat of Asheville. Then take a moment and go to my Patreon crowdfunding page at patreon.com/The Overlook Podcast. Help my show climb to $1,000 in monthly contributions today, and thank you so much for your support.